Welcome to the roaring world of chainsaws, where steel bites through timber and raw power rules the forest. From precision cuts to massive takedowns, this is the ultimate show of chainsaw domination. Subscribe now and feel the fury. Welcome to Tree Power Channel. Up high, workers use safety harnesses to keep their balance as they prune tree branches with chainsaws. Each large branch is tied to a rope and slowly lowered to the ground. On the ground, a support team quickly pulls the branches into the roaring maw of a wood chipper, which grinds them into sawdust in seconds. The forester wore a helmet and used a steel chainsaw to cut hard into the trunk of an ancient tree. Sawdust flew white. The sound of the engine echoed through the deep forest. In the forest with thick white snow, a worker wearing protective gear. He started the chainsaw. The saw blade roared, screeching into the blackened tree trunk, still covered in ash. The gray-black sawdust flew up with each cut, creating a spectacular scene. A worker stands next to an uprooted tree in the middle of the forest. He dons protective gear, starts the chainsaw, and begins cutting through the massive tree. Each cut is powerful and decisive, the sound of the saw echoing through the wilderness. On a steep slope, a charred tree trunk stands alone on the dry ground. A female worker wearing protective gear and a helmet, holding a chainsaw firmly, she starts the machine. The sharp blade tears through the charred bark, cinders flying with each cut. A strong, determined image in the midst of harsh nature. On a large tree that shaded the entire garden, the worker clung to the trunk, skillfully moving between each large branch. He used a chainsaw to trim the long branches, sawdust falling to the ground below. The crane reaches its steel arm high into the trees, encircling the trunk waiting to be cut. With each wind of the chainsaw, a section of the tree is released, and the crane gently lifts it down, precise and powerful in the air. In the middle of the forest, a black tree trunk. A worker wearing a hard hat, holding a chainsaw, the sound of the saw echoing in the quiet space. The saw blade screeched violently, cutting through the spongy burnt wood on the outside, deep inside the hard core, creating a powerful and cinematic scene.
HIGHLANDS Crew 20, road training.
In the middle of the forest, the worker wore protective clothing. He turned on the saw blade roared. Shards of coal flew out with a powerful cutting force. Black sawdust floated in the cold wind. Amidst the ashes, the image of the worker appeared full of courage and determination. worker wearing protective gear and a safety harness hangs securely from a tree trunk. In his hand is a compact chainsaw, roaring loudly. He carefully trims each branch. The branches are tied with ropes, slowly lowered to the ground where a support team is waiting. On the small slope, the worker wearing protective gear, helmet, and noise-canceling headphones gripped the steep ground. He held the chainsaw tightly, cutting into the trunk of a large tree. Sawdust flew everywhere. The sound of the chainsaw echoed throughout the mountains and forests. The sound of cracking rang out. The tree trunk began to fall to the ground. Fallen leaves and dry branches flew everywhere. In a dense forest, a group of workers wearing protective gear and helmets were using steel chainsaws to cut into the trunk of a large diameter tree. The saw blades roared, digging deep into the thick wood, sending sawdust flying. The tree shook, then slowly fell to the ground amid the echoes of the forest, a breathtaking and powerful moment.